Today the topic is systemic appreciation of the global water crisis. So Ray, let me just hand over to you.
Good, thanks. Well, Scott, good to see you all. Nice to be back. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about what I've been up to in some ways for the last decade. I guess particularly the European part is the last decade, particularly with work with those of us who are in the SLIM project and Kevin working with the Environment Agency. I'm not going to dwell on Europe greatly, but draw on experiences I had earlier this year on a trip to Israel, and also, of course, getting re-engaging with Australia and water issues in Australia. So I want to just contextualise the so-called global water crisis in three situations that I've experienced, and then talk about how we might understand these situations and what how those understandings might link to managing water more holistically. As I go through, what I'd invite you to think about is, as I outline my experiences in each of these three countries, I'd like to invite you to think about what, from your perspective, might constitute an effective performance for water and river managing. I was invited to participate in a 5-person study tour of Israel in February this year, looking at the social and institutional aspects of water management in Israel. And of course it goes without saying that Israel is a complex situation in its geopolitical terms, its cultural and social terms, not to mention its biophysical issues. And this is Jerusalem, and of course, and it epitomises all of the complexities that are manifest in that particular part of the world. So this is the border of Israel here, which on the eastern side is bordered by the Jordan River principally. Jordan River runs into the Dead Sea and eventually out into the Red Sea. Up here you have the Golan Heights, which is of course contested territory bordering Syria and Lebanon. The Gaza Strip's down here, and Egypt's below that. And you move from in the north from a Mediterranean climate through to a desert climate as you go south. I divided the water development in Israel into 6 phases. If you think of the first phase was pre the establishment of the Israeli state in 1948, and was probably typical of the Palestinian scattered homesteads and of both Palestinian and Israelis. And one of the first things they did after they created the State of Israel was to build what's called the National Water Carrier, which you can see is this down here, which is and they dammed Lake Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee on the Jordan River, and essentially pushed the bulk of the water into the National Water Carrier and not down the Jordan River. The third phase was sort of securing the borders through further integration and mining of water resources. There is an ethos within much of the Israeli water management sector that there's no such thing as sustainable development, there's only progressive development, and that you should exploit what resources you have until the next technology comes along. Phase 4 is what I've called innovation for efficiency, and Israel is very well known for its development of drip irrigation systems and for high water use efficiency in irrigated agriculture, and they've now almost converted all of their agricultural irrigation over into irrigation with recycled water as well. So they've been very innovative, and they have developed a lot of technologies which they export internationally on the back of this water use efficiency and irrigation technologies. Phase 5 I've called invested in magic bullets. This is to because essentially, despite all of this other effort, their water supply situation is very vulnerable, and they're now having to turn to desalination plants. You can see this place, Ashkelon. There's a very one of the world's biggest desalination plants at Ashkelon. I'll come back and mention that in a minute. And then I've talked up there about phase 6, which is return of environmental water. What does that mean? Well, they've finally, in the last couple of years, managed to get some legislation through the Parliament where they're returning a little bit of recycled water to rivers. About 3 years ago, the state of Israel's rivers was that every river was essentially an open sewer. You would certainly not want to. Somewhere just here was where Jesus was baptised in the Jordan River, and you'd probably die if you went into the Jordan River there now. We were charged with looking at the social institutional aspects, and you can see that I made good use of our techniques that we use in systems here. This is a systems map that I developed iteratively over the tour to look at the up here the water supply system and the different institutional arrangement subsystem. I mean, you might focus on the Israeli ministries subsystem that's looking after it. I mean, there's a huge number of ministries associated in the water management system. I mean, it's an international issue because the giving back of the Golan Heights would deprive them of some of their most significant catchments and water security for water going into the Sea of Galilee. But the primary water responsibility, the most powerful ministry, is the Ministry for Infrastructure. So it's the infrastructure ministry that controls essentially the integration development, and it's essentially an engineer, water supply, water security system. It has very little focus, or has in the past, on environmental issues, about river health, or any of these sorts of, or ecosystem health issues. I mentioned the Hula Wetlands. These were probably one of the biggest wetlands in the region, which were completely drained in the pre and post Israeli state establishment. These were a very, very significant site for stopping on the massive migrations, particularly of cranes and other things going north and south. As is so typical of so many draining of wetlands, what did they produce? The unintended consequences were they produced acid sulfite soils in which it was impossible to grow crops after a period of time because it produces acid. The sulfuric acid gets into the waterway and contaminates the waterway. So they've had to put in re-engineering works, membranes and other sorts of things, totally re-engineer it after the clearing to stop the contamination of subsequent waterways. They're still cropping there, but they're trying to mix it with, if you like, ecotourism and returning certain aspects to nature, so-called. And a tremendous number of cranes now, rather than going to Africa in the migration, they now overwinter there because they're fed by the Israelis there. And the red lines are the institutional arrangements which are supposed to be the minimum amount of water that can be abstracted from the lake. Beyond, if you abstract below that, you threaten the whole ecosystem. It's likely to collapse. Over the last decade, there have been at least 4 occasions where they've gone significantly below the red lines. That in 1 year be going below the red lines, and because it's connected up with the aquifers, they've induced the whole integrated system to go below the critical threshold in the mountain aquifer, which has led to a great infusion of salt into that aquifer, and so they've increased the salinity in that aquifer, which is the primary aquifer under the Palestinian territories. And they've now, as of August this year, because climate change has come along to affect all of these things, they have now said, well, the red lines are not really red lines. We're going to introduce a black line, which is lower still, and we definitely won't go beyond the black lines. Now, what does this exemplify? It exemplifies to me a couple of things. One is Israel has been held up in water management circles as the cutting edge of integrated water management. But integrated is essentially only technologically integrated. So it's the engineering integration that has been held up whenever that claim has been made. And what is clear is that the technological aspects have never been effectively integrated with the institutional aspects. And that what the existence of the national water carrier means is that the political forces at play will always be able to act to influence the amount of water that's released, because the technology enables that action to be carried out.